It was supposed to be a perfect evening. A quiet, intimate date night to celebrate our 1-year anniversary. The kind of night where everything falls into place, the candlelight, the soft music, the uninterrupted time spent with the person you love. But as soon as I opened the door, ready to whisk my girlfriend, Zoe, off to dinner, I knew something was wrong. Zoe's best friend, Ellie, was sitting on the couch in the living room, sipping wine. She was supposed to be out of town for the weekend. I had made sure everything was set up for a romantic evening, planning the dinner and reservations months in advance, just so we could celebrate in peace. But there Ellie was, lounging as if she owned the place. "Zoe, I thought you were meeting me in 5 minutes," I said, a mix of confusion and frustration creeping into my voice. Zoe gave me an apologetic look as she stood in front of the mirror, touching up her makeup. "I know, babe. I'm sorry." Ellie wanted to catch up before we left. She's been feeling down lately, and I promised I'd hang out with her for a little while. I glanced at Ellie, who was now staring at me with that faint smirk of hers that I had always found a little unsettling. The way she looked at me, like she knew something I didn't. Her eyes didn't exactly scream "I'm happy for you" when she saw Zoe and me together. In fact, her subtle but persistent interference over the past few months had been starting to get on my nerves. I smiled politely, though I could feel the irritation building inside me. "No problem," I said, forcing the words out as I plastered a fake smile on my face. But I was already plotting the course of the evening in my head, how to salvage it, how to make it special despite her presence. Zoe didn't seem to notice the discomfort in the air, too caught up in trying to comfort her friend. "Are you sure?" "I don't want to be a third wheel," Ellie added, practically purring the words, her eyes never leaving me. It wasn't subtle. It was almost like she was trying to make sure I noticed how much she was trying to put a wedge between Zoe and me. Ellie had always been overbearing, but tonight there was something more to it. Something that felt like a deliberate attempt to ruin our night, even if she wasn't doing it overtly. Maybe she didn't realize how much she was coming across as manipulative. Or maybe she just didn't care. Zoe turned to me, flashing that apologetic smile again. "Ellie's been a little off lately, and I don't want to leave her hanging. It's just going to be a few more minutes. Are you okay with that?" I sighed, trying to keep my voice steady. "Of course. It's just, I've been looking forward to this all week." Zoe gave me a reassuring smile. "I know, babe. Just a few minutes. You're the best, you know that?" Her words should have reassured me, but instead, I felt like I was on the edge of a trap. Something didn't feel right. There was this eerie feeling in the pit of my stomach, like I was being set up. I tried to shake it off, telling myself I was overthinking it. But that nagging feeling just wouldn't go away. I glanced at Ellie again, who, by now, had stood up and was busy fiddling with her phone, clearly doing everything in her power to stay in the conversation. But there was a strange energy in the room, a tense kind of quiet, like she was waiting for something, waiting for the right moment to make her move. Zoe went into the kitchen to grab her coat, leaving me alone with Ellie for a few seconds. I could feel her eyes on me the entire time, and I didn't like the way she was watching me, like she was sizing me up, testing me, trying to find a weakness. Her smile was tight, too. Forced. Like she knew something I didn't. "You know," Ellie began, her voice smooth but with a subtle edge, "it's not too late, you know. You could just cancel dinner with Zoe, and we could hang out here for the night. I'm sure she wouldn't mind." I froze. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice faltering slightly. "We already have reservations. We've been planning this night for a while now." Ellie chuckled, the sound too sweet to be innocent. "Well, maybe you don't have to be in such a rush, right? After all, you can always do this again another time. Why not stay in and just enjoy the company? Zoe wouldn't mind. She loves hanging out with me." I tried to keep my tone light, but it was hard. I wasn't sure if she was being serious or if she was just trying to mess with me. I don't think she'd appreciate that. This is important to both of us. Oh, I'm sure, Ellie said with a flick of her wrist. But you know, Zoe and I go way back. We've shared everything, and I'm sure she wouldn't mind putting you on the back burner for one night, especially when I need her. You two are in love, sure, but sometimes, it's good to have a little space. Don't you think? Her words stung, and something about the way she said them felt like she was poking at something delicate. Zoe and I had been together for a year, and I knew she cared deeply about me. But Ellie had a way of planting seeds of doubt, of twisting things around until they didn't look the way they actually were. But I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I wasn't going to let Ellie destroy what Zoe and I had built. Not tonight. Not ever. Ellie, I said slowly, my voice steady now, if you think I'm just going to cancel dinner and hang out with you, you're mistaken. Her smile faltered for a split second, but she quickly regained her composure, leaning back into the couch and crossing her arms. Oh, come on. Don't be like that. I'm just trying to offer you a little perspective. You don't always have to be the good guy. Before I could respond, Zoe returned, her coat in hand, looking a little flustered. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to keep you waiting. Are you still up for dinner? Of course, I said quickly, though my mind was already spinning, trying to figure out how to salvage the evening without losing my temper. Zoe smiled brightly and headed toward the door, clearly not noticing the tension that lingered between Ellie and me. But I could feel the anger simmering just beneath the surface. I wasn't about to let Ellie derail our night, and I certainly wasn't going to let her control the situation. As we left the apartment, I shot one last look at Ellie, whose eyes were narrowed, her lips pressed into a tight line. She knew she wasn't going to win this battle tonight. And as much as I hated the tension between us, I wasn't about to let her sabotage our anniversary. She had underestimated me, and that was a mistake she'd come to regret. The night wasn't ruined. Not yet. But I could already feel the wheels turning in my mind. I wasn't going to let her win. Not while Zoe and I still had something special to hold on to. This wasn't just a date night. It was a test, one I was determined to pass. And if Ellie thought she could break us apart so easily, she was in for a rude awakening. The drive to the restaurant was mostly quiet. Zoe, as usual, was lost in her thoughts, staring out of the window with a smile that made me want to hold on to this moment forever. I tried to keep the conversation light, but the words felt hollow. All I could think about was Ellie, her attempt to derail my night, her underlying bitterness that seemed to ooze from every word she spoke. I wasn't going to let it slide, but I also didn't want to ruin the evening for Zoe. Are you okay, babe? Zoe asked, her voice breaking the silence. She turned her head towards me, the warmth in her eyes like a balm to my irritation. Yeah, just thinking, I replied, forcing a smile. You seem a little off. Is everything all right? She gave me that knowing look, the one that told me she could read me like a book. I sighed, taking a deep breath before speaking. It's nothing, really. Just. Ellie, you know? Zoe raised an eyebrow. Ellie? What about her? I hesitated. I didn't want to ruin her night, but at the same time, I couldn't ignore the elephant in the room. I don't know. She's been acting a little strange lately, and tonight, I don't know, it felt like she was trying to get in the way. Like she was trying to mess with our night. Zoe's eyes widened in surprise, but she quickly masked it with a neutral expression. What do you mean, mess with our night? I thought about what I had seen earlier, Ellie's persistent interference, her subtle digs, the way she'd tried to pull Zoe's attention away from me. I wasn't going to call her out too aggressively, but I needed Zoe to see it for what it was. Just the way she was acting, Zoe. It didn't sit right with me. It felt like she was trying to insert herself into our plans, you know? Like she didn't want us to have this night to ourselves. Zoe was quiet for a moment, processing what I'd said. I didn't realize she was doing that. I'm sorry, babe. She's been through a lot lately, and sometimes, she doesn't realize how she comes off. I nodded, my jaw tightening slightly. I understood that Ellie was Zoe's best friend, but her behavior had crossed a line. I couldn't just sit back and let her continue pulling the strings, especially not when it came to my relationship with Zoe. You don't have to apologize for her, I said, my tone more serious than before. I just want you to see what's happening. We deserve this night. We don't need to let her ruin it. Zoe's face softened as she reached out and placed her hand over mine. You're right. You're always so good about handling things, and I don't want her to come between us. We're going to have a great night, okay? I squeezed her hand, feeling a wave of relief wash over me. It wasn't just about Ellie, it was about Zoe and me, the connection we had, the bond that was strong enough to withstand anything. But as much as I appreciated Zoe's words, something deep inside me knew this wasn't the last I'd heard from Ellie. Not by a long shot. We arrived at the restaurant, and the night seemed to fall into place. The atmosphere was cozy, the lighting dim, and the table for two was perfect. The moment Zoe sat down across from me, that calm, quiet feeling returned. For the first time in hours, I felt like we were back in our bubble, away from the tension that had been gnawing at me. We ordered wine, shared appetizers, and talked about everything and nothing. Zoe's laughter was like music, and it reminded me of why I loved her so much. This was the woman I wanted to build a future with, the woman who made me feel like the luckiest guy alive. But as the night wore on, my thoughts kept drifting back to Ellie. I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. She wasn't going to let go that easily. And as much as I wanted to focus on the present, I knew something needed to be done. I couldn't just sit back and let her continue sabotaging our relationship from the shadows. When Zoe went to the bathroom, I found my chance. It wasn't a big move, but it was one that had the potential to make Ellie understand that she couldn't just mess with our lives and get away with it. I pulled out my phone and sent Ellie a quick message. I know what you're trying to do, and I won't let it happen. If you think you're going to come between me and Zoe, you're wrong. Back off. This is our night, and you don't have a place in it. The message was blunt, direct, and to the point. I wasn't going to play games with Ellie anymore. She had tried to undermine me, to create tension between Zoe and me, but I wasn't about to let her have that power. If she wanted to play dirty, I could do the same. I hit send, and a strange sense of satisfaction washed over me. I knew Ellie would read it. I knew she would get the message loud and clear. She wasn't the only one who could manipulate a situation. I wasn't going to sit idly by and watch her wreck everything I cared about. Just as I put my phone down, Zoe returned to the table, her eyes bright, her energy infectious as always. What's going on with you? She asked, settling into her chair. You're awfully quiet all of a sudden. I smiled, forcing myself to look more relaxed than I felt. Just thinking about how lucky I am to be with you, I said, leaning across the table to take her hand. She blushed slightly, and the way she looked at me made everything feel right again. For a moment, Ellie's shadow seemed far away. But I knew better. This was only the beginning. I had no intention of letting her tear us apart. Not when I was finally starting to feel like we were on the same page. The rest of the evening was mostly uneventful. Zoe and I enjoyed our meal, had a little too much wine, and talked about future plans. I could tell she was a little distracted at times, but I chalked it up to her being tired or perhaps thinking about Ellie. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was looming. I had put my foot down, but Ellie wasn't the type to back down without a fight. When we returned home, I was hoping for a quiet end to the night. Zoe went into the kitchen to grab a bottle of water, leaving me alone for a few moments. That's when my phone buzzed. It was Ellie. Her message was short and to the point, "You're making a big mistake. Zoe isn't as committed to you as you think. She's just using you. Don't say I didn't warn you." I couldn't help but laugh, a dark, bitter sound escaping my lips. Ellie thought she could manipulate me, try to get under my skin with cheap, hurtful words. But she didn't know who she was dealing with. I typed a response without hesitation. You think you can break us? Think again. Zoe and I are stronger than you realize. Stay out of it, Ellie. I hit send, feeling a rush of satisfaction once again. Ellie had made her move, but I had turned the tables. Now it was my turn to make sure she regretted it. I put my phone down and took a deep breath. Zoe returned from the kitchen, and I forced a smile, pushing all the thoughts of Ellie out of my head. Everything okay? Zoe asked, looking at me with concern. Yeah, I said, smiling at her. Everything's perfect now. As we settled into the couch, I couldn't help but feel a sense of calm wash over me. Ellie thought she could control things, but I was done being manipulated. I wasn't going to let her ruin what I had with Zoe. The night was ours now, and nothing, not even Ellie, could change that. The next few days passed in a blur, a mix of normalcy and tension that seemed to hang in the air. Zoe and I tried to go about our lives like nothing had happened. She was her usual bubbly self, the same woman I had fallen for a year ago, while I quietly stewed in the back of my mind, replaying the events of our anniversary night. Despite everything, Zoe was mostly oblivious to the undercurrent of tension I had been feeling. Ellie had tried to manipulate our time together, tried to make me feel like I was the problem, but I wasn't backing down. I had made it clear to her that I wasn't some pawn in her twisted game, and now, the only thing that mattered was keeping Zoe safe from whatever Ellie was planning. It was a Tuesday evening when the storm finally hit. Zoe and I were curled up on the couch, watching a movie, when my phone buzzed. At first, I thought it was just a work email or a random notification, but when I saw the name on the screen, Ellie, it felt like the air left my lungs. I ignored it at first, not wanting to stir up trouble. But then another message popped up, followed by a third. And then a fourth. Ellie wasn't going to let it go. She wasn't going to give up that easily. I glanced at Zoe, who was fully engrossed in the movie, and I felt a wave of guilt wash over me. Should I tell her? Should I bring this up again? I didn't want to add any more weight to her already complicated friendship with Ellie, but at the same time, I knew something needed to be done. Ellie wasn't just going to let things be. I opened the first message. I warned you. Zoe's not what you think. She's just using you to get back at me. You'll see it soon enough. My blood ran cold. Ellie had crossed a line. I knew this wasn't just about a little jealousy or petty drama anymore. There was something deeper, darker going on, and I was caught in the middle of it. I stared at the screen for a few moments, trying to gather my thoughts. I wasn't about to let Ellie tear apart my relationship with Zoe. But this was manipulation at its finest. I could feel the weight of it pressing down on me, but I wasn't going to let her win. I didn't respond to the message. Instead, I closed my phone and put it on the coffee table, my mind racing. I couldn't let Zoe get caught in the middle of this. But how could I protect her without making things worse? As if on cue, Zoe shifted next to me, her hand brushing against mine. She smiled at me, her eyes full of warmth. What's going on, babe? You've been quiet. I forced a smile, trying to keep the unease from creeping into my voice. Just thinking, that's all. Nothing to worry about. She didn't seem convinced, but she didn't press me. Okay. Well, you know I'm here if you want to talk, right? I know, Zoe. I know. Her hand found mine, and for a moment, I allowed myself to feel the comfort of her touch, trying to forget about the storm that was brewing just out of sight. But the truth was, I couldn't ignore it any longer. Ellie wasn't going to stop. She was relentless. She was determined to create doubt, to pull Zoe away from me, and I had to stop her before things went any further. The next day, I made a plan. I wasn't going to let Ellie continue to manipulate Zoe and me. I couldn't just sit back and hope it would blow over. I needed to confront her, head on, and let her know that I wasn't afraid of her games. That afternoon, I called Ellie. I could feel my pulse quicken as the phone rang. Part of me was nervous. What if she tried to twist things, make me look like the bad guy? But I knew this had to happen. I couldn't wait around for Zoe to get hurt. Hello? Ellie answered, her voice smooth and calm, like nothing had ever happened. Ellie, I said, my tone firm. We need to talk. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head. About what? She asked, sounding casual, like she wasn't trying to manipulate anything. About you trying to come between me and Zoe. About you sending me messages, stirring up trouble, and pretending like you have some kind of power over our relationship. It stops now. Her laugh came across as almost too confident. You're really not getting it, are you? You think Zoe is really in love with you? She's just using you, and once she gets what she wants, she'll move on. She always does. I could hear the venom in her voice, the underlying bitterness that made my skin crawl. She wasn't just jealous. She was hurt, maybe even threatened by my presence in Zoe's life. But I wasn't about to let her control me with her cruel words. Don't talk about Zoe like that, I snapped. She's the best thing that's ever happened to me. And if you think you can tear us apart with your lies and manipulation, you're mistaken. You don't get to control her, and you don't get to control me. So if you know what's good for you, you'll back off. Ellie didn't respond right away. For a moment, there was only silence between us, and I could feel my pulse thumping in my ears. I had said my piece. Now, it was her move. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, almost dangerous. You think you've won? You're just a pawn in a much bigger game. Zoe will see the truth eventually, and when she does, don't say I didn't warn you. Her words hung in the air like poison, and I knew then that this wasn't just a petty rivalry. This was something deeper, something Ellie had been planning for a long time. She was determined to break us apart, no matter the cost. I exhaled sharply, trying to control my rising anger. You don't scare me, Ellie. I love Zoe, and nothing you do will change that. And with that, I ended the call. I stared at my phone for a moment, my hands trembling slightly from the adrenaline of the confrontation. I had made it clear to Ellie that I wasn't backing down, but I also knew this wasn't the end. She would try again. I had no doubt about that. I needed to be ready. For Zoe's sake, for mine, and for our future together, I couldn't let Ellie win. She had tried to manipulate me, tried to make me doubt Zoe, and I wasn't going to let that happen again. Zoe came into the room a few moments later, her eyes searching mine. Everything okay? She asked, her voice soft but filled with concern. I forced a smile, hiding the storm inside. Yeah, everything's fine. Just had to handle a few things. She nodded, but I could tell she wasn't convinced. But she didn't push me. Not yet. And that was the problem. I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep this secret from her. Ellie had already started planting seeds of doubt in Zoe's mind, and I wasn't sure how long it would take for them to grow. I couldn't protect Zoe from everything. But for now, I had to. I just hoped I had enough time before Ellie did something I couldn't undo. The days after my confrontation with Ellie passed in a strange, unsettling haze. I knew I had to protect Zoe, but there was this constant knot in my stomach. Ellie wasn't done, not by a long shot. I could feel it, her presence, lingering just outside the door, ready to strike when I least expected it. But I kept up the facade. Zoe and I continued to spend time together, laughing, making plans, and doing our best to push away the dark cloud that was starting to hover over us. For her, it seemed like everything was normal. But for me, it was like walking on a tightrope, trying to balance my love for her and the nagging feeling that something was about to break. I was right. It started on a Friday evening. Zoe and I were at home, cooking dinner together, a simple, quiet evening just like the old days. As we chopped vegetables and laughed over a glass of wine, I tried to ignore the ping of my phone on the counter. I already knew it was Ellie. I had turned off notifications, but the temptation to check the messages was overwhelming. Something inside me was screaming to look, to see if she'd finally gone too far. Zoe was humming along to a song on the radio, completely oblivious to what was about to happen. I grabbed my phone when she wasn't looking and quickly checked the screen. It was Ellie. Again. The first message was short, but it hit hard. You don't know the full story. You're just a distraction for Zoe. She's not the person you think she is. Keep pretending, though. It'll all catch up to you. I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands were shaking as I read the words again. What was she trying to do? She had been playing games for weeks, but this felt like more. This was her final attempt to tear us apart. I didn't want to let Zoe see me like this. I didn't want her to know that Ellie's words were starting to take their toll. But the message felt too loaded, too manipulative. Ellie had been sowing seeds of doubt in my mind for weeks, but now she was going for the kill. Was I being too paranoid? Or was there some truth to her words? I shut my phone off and tucked it in my pocket. No more reading. No more second-guessing. But my thoughts kept swirling. Zoe turned around and smiled at me, holding up a plate of food she had just finished preparing. Dinner's ready. Everything okay? You're kind of quiet tonight. I pasted a smile on my face. Yeah, I'm good. Just thinking about everything we have to do this weekend. You know, we should take a day trip. Go to that vineyard we've been talking about for months. Zoe's face lit up. I love that idea. We can make it a weekend getaway. Just you and me. Sounds perfect. But her joy felt distant. I wasn't fully there with her, and she could sense it. She always could. Are you sure everything's okay? She asked again, placing the food on the table and coming over to where I was standing. She reached out and touched my arm, her eyes full of concern. I felt a pang of guilt in my chest. She had no idea what was happening behind the scenes. No idea that Ellie had been planting doubt in my mind, playing a game I didn't want to be a part of. I couldn't drag her into this mess. I'm fine, I said, shaking my head slightly. I just got a little caught up in the idea of this weekend. You know how much I love getting away with you. She smiled at me, and for a moment everything felt right. But I knew that the moment would pass. I couldn't keep pretending. I couldn't keep hiding my fear. Ellie had gone too far, and if I didn't confront this head-on, it would consume me. And us. That night, as we lay in bed, Zoe curled up against me. I felt an intense sense of urgency rising within me. I had to tell her. I couldn't keep this from her any longer. I had to protect her, even if it meant confronting the ugly truth about Ellie and what she'd been trying to do. I pulled Zoe a little closer and kissed the top of her head. She sighed contentedly and drifted off to sleep, but I was wide awake, thinking. My heart ached with the weight of it all. I loved Zoe more than anything, and I knew she deserved to know everything. She needed to understand what Ellie was trying to do, but how could I tell her? How would she react? Would she believe me, or would Ellie's manipulation have already twisted her perception of me? I decided I wouldn't go to bed without figuring it out. I couldn't lie to her any longer. She deserved the truth, even if it meant everything would change. The next morning, I couldn't wait any longer. Zoe and I sat down at the breakfast table, and I felt my stomach twist in knots. It was time. Zoe, I started, trying to keep my voice steady, there's something I need to talk to you about. She looked at me with curiosity, setting down her coffee. What's going on? You seem serious. I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of everything that had been building up. It's about Ellie. Zoe's expression shifted slightly, and I saw the flicker of worry in her eyes. What about her? I don't want to make you upset, but I need you to understand something. Ellie's been trying to come between us. She's been sending me messages, trying to convince me that you're not really into this relationship, that I'm just some kind of distraction for you. I paused, searching her face for any sign of disbelief or anger. Zoe sat back in her chair, staring at me in shock. What do you mean, messages? I could see the confusion in her eyes, the disbelief. She had no idea. Ellie had done her work so thoroughly that Zoe hadn't even noticed. She's been sending me texts, trying to twist the truth, make me doubt you, make me think that you're not serious about this relationship. I swallowed hard, watching her reaction closely. Zoe was quiet for a long moment, processing everything I had just told her. Then, she spoke, her voice soft but edged with uncertainty. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I felt the guilt flood my chest. I didn't want to make things worse. I didn't want to drag you into her drama. I wanted to handle it on my own. Zoe's face softened. Babe, you should have told me. I don't want to keep secrets from each other. But this, she shook her head, clearly stunned. I had no idea. Ellie's been acting strange for a while now, but I didn't think she'd go this far. I looked at her, my heart pounding. I didn't know what to do. But I'm telling you now because I don't want her to keep getting in the way. I love you, Zoe. I'm not going anywhere. Tears welled up in her eyes as she reached for my hand, squeezing it tightly. I love you too. And I won't let her tear us apart. I promise. But even as I felt a wave of relief wash over me, I knew this wasn't over. Ellie wasn't going to take this lightly. The real battle was just beginning. The next few days felt like walking on eggshells. Zoe and I were still in that delicate balance where everything seemed fine on the surface, but underneath, there was a growing tension. Ellie's words, her manipulations, still lingered in the back of my mind. I had told Zoe everything, and while she seemed to believe me, I couldn't shake the feeling that Ellie wasn't going to let this slide. She wasn't just going to back off because I exposed her lies. It was a Wednesday afternoon when I received the message that confirmed my fears. Zoe was out for a meeting with her clients, and I had the house to myself. I was trying to focus on work, but my mind kept drifting back to Ellie's cruel games and her twisted plans to destroy everything Zoe and I had. It felt like a waiting game. The calm before the storm. I had just gotten back from a quick grocery run when my phone buzzed. It was from Zoe, and she had sent me a screenshot of a text. I froze, my heart skipping a beat as I read the message. You're so blind. He's been lying to you this whole time. I'm just trying to help you see the truth. He's not the guy you think he is. Don't let him control you. He's manipulative, and you deserve better. It was from Ellie. She had found a way to send it directly to Zoe. The message was as venomous and calculated as I had feared. I stood there in the kitchen, staring at my phone, trying to process what I had just read. How had Ellie gotten to her? How had she manipulated things so quickly? Zoe had always been kind-hearted, always had the best intentions, but I knew this wasn't just about me anymore. Ellie had started to make Zoe doubt everything. The ping of my phone startled me, and I quickly saw that Zoe had followed up with a message of her own. Babe, I'm really confused. I don't know what to think right now. I was on the verge of panic, but I forced myself to calm down. I couldn't let Ellie win. Not like this. I called Zoe immediately, my heart pounding. It rang a few times before she picked up, her voice shaky. Hey, Zoe. I saw the message. I swear to you, it's all lies, I said, my words rushing out, desperate to clear the air before any more damage could be done. I don't know, babe, she replied softly. Ellie's been my friend for so long, and she's always been there for me. She's never been this direct before. But I just need some time to think. I could feel the distance growing between us, a chasm that Ellie was expertly creating. Zoe, listen to me. I love you. And I'm not trying to control you. Ellie is the one who's been lying. She's manipulating everything. I'm not the person she's trying to make me out to be. There was a long pause before Zoe finally spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. I need some space, okay? I just don't know who to trust right now. I could hear her breathing unevenly, and it cut me to the core. I didn't want to lose her, not like this. But Ellie had planted a seed of doubt, and I knew it was going to take more than just words to fix it. I won't stop fighting for us, I said firmly. I love you, and I'll do whatever it takes to prove it. Zoe sighed, the sound heavy with emotion. I know, but I need time to figure things out. I just need to think. The line went dead, and I was left standing in the kitchen, staring at the phone in my hand. Everything felt like it was slipping through my fingers. Ellie had made her move, and now I was left to pick up the pieces. But I wasn't going to let her win. Not like this. Not over something so cruel and manipulative. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, my mind running in 1,000 different directions. What had gone wrong? Why was Zoe listening to Ellie? Was our relationship truly strong enough to survive this? I kept telling myself that it wasn't over yet. I couldn't give up. I had to show Zoe that I wasn't the villain Ellie was painting me to be. I had to prove that I was the man she loved, the one who had never done anything but support her, care for her, and protect her. I checked my phone again, hoping for some sign that Zoe would reach out to me, but there was nothing. The silence between us felt suffocating. At 2 a.m., I finally couldn't take it anymore. I needed to do something, take some kind of action. I couldn't just sit here and wait for Ellie to destroy everything I had worked so hard to build with Zoe. I texted Ellie. You've crossed the line, Ellie. I won't let you manipulate her anymore. Leave us alone, or I'll make sure you regret it. I hesitated for a moment before pressing send. I knew it wasn't the most measured response, but I had reached my limit. Ellie had played with my emotions for far too long, and now she was dragging Zoe into it. I wasn't going to stand by and let her get away with it. The reply came almost instantly. You're making a big mistake. You'll see. Zoe will never choose you over me. She's always needed me, and you can't take that away. You'll regret this. The message sent a chill through me, but I wasn't scared anymore. I was angry that she thought she could control everything, that she thought she could tear apart something so real. I wasn't going to let her. I put my phone down and ran a hand through my hair. The battle had just begun, and Ellie was relentless. But this time, I wasn't going to back down. I was going to fight for Zoe, fight for us, no matter what it took. The next morning, I received a message from Zoe. We need to talk. Please come over. I didn't hesitate. I was already on my way before I even read the full message. Whatever was going on, I knew this was my chance to fix things. It was time for me to confront her and, more importantly, confront the woman who had been poisoning her mind. When I arrived at Zoe's apartment, I found her sitting on the couch, her eyes swollen from what I could only guess were tears. She looked up at me with a mixture of sadness and frustration. I don't know what to believe anymore, she said softly. I don't want to lose you, but I also don't want to lose Ellie. She's been my best friend for so long, and now I feel like I'm being torn apart. I sat down beside her, taking her hand in mine. Zoe, I swear to you, Ellie is manipulating everything. She's trying to come between us. She's been doing it for weeks. But I promise you, I'm not the person she's making me out to be. I love you. I only want what's best for us. Zoe's eyes were filled with doubt, but there was something else there too, something I hadn't seen before. It was a flicker of realization, a glimpse of clarity. But how can I trust you when she's telling me all of these things? She's always been there for me, and now you're telling me she's the one I should doubt? I don't expect you to just trust me on my word alone, I said earnestly. I know I've made mistakes, but I'm not the villain she wants you to think I am. I'm here, Zoe. I'm not going anywhere. I just need you to see that she's been poisoning your thoughts. She doesn't want us to be happy. She wants to control you, and I can't let her do that. Zoe looked at me for a long time, her face unreadable. Finally, she spoke. I don't want to lose you either. But I need to know I'm making the right decision. You are, I said, my voice steady. I won't let her tear us apart. She squeezed my hand, and for the first time in days, I saw a spark of hope in her eyes. But I knew this wasn't over. The real battle was still ahead, and Ellie wasn't going to give up without a fight. The following week passed like a storm, intense and unpredictable. Zoe and I were closer than we'd been in days, our relationship stronger now that the truth was out in the open. But Ellie was still lurking in the shadows, her manipulative grip tightening with each passing day. I could see her influence over Zoe was slowly starting to weaken, but I knew that this wasn't going to be easy. Ellie wasn't the type of person who would just accept defeat. It was a Friday afternoon when things came to a head. I had just wrapped up a meeting at work and was heading home when I got a call from Zoe. Her voice was shaking, and it sent an icy wave of fear through me. I need you to come over, she said, her words rushed. Now. I didn't ask any questions. I knew this wasn't just another quiet moment where we could sort things out. Something had changed. Something big. I rushed over to her place, my heart racing. When I walked through the door, I saw Zoe sitting on the couch, her face pale, her eyes wide with shock. What happened? I asked, my voice tight with anxiety. What's wrong? Zoe took a deep breath, her hands trembling. Ellie, she's gone too far this time, and I don't know how to fix it. She paused, looking at me, almost like she was trying to gauge my reaction. She said that if I didn't choose her over you, she would ruin everything we have. She threatened you. She said that she would make you pay for taking me away from her. The words hit me like a punch to the gut, and for a moment, I just stood there, unable to process it. Ellie had always been dangerous, but this was something else entirely. I knew she was manipulative, but this? She's completely lost it, Zoe continued, her voice trembling. I never thought she'd go this far. She's threatened me with our friendship, and she's making me choose. I could feel my anger bubbling up, a storm that had been building for weeks finally breaking loose. Ellie had crossed the line so many times, but now it was personal. This was no longer just about me and Zoe. It was about Ellie trying to control our lives, to tear us apart out of pure jealousy and spite. Zoe, I said softly, taking her hands in mine. You don't have to choose. I love you. And I will never force you to make a decision between me and anyone else. But I'm not going to let her continue to manipulate you. She's using you, and I won't stand by and let her hurt you any longer. Zoe looked at me with tears in her eyes, but I saw something else in her gaze. It was determination. I don't know what to do, she whispered. I don't want to lose you. I don't want to lose her either. But I don't want to live like this. Then you don't have to, I said firmly, my voice steady. You don't have to keep living in fear of her. You don't have to let her control you. This is your life, Zoe, and you deserve to be happy. With me. Zoe hesitated for a moment, her gaze falling to the floor. It felt like time had slowed down, the weight of the moment pressing down on both of us. But then, she took a deep breath and looked back up at me, her eyes clear and resolute. I'm done, she said, her voice breaking slightly but full of conviction. I'm done being manipulated by Ellie. I'm done letting her control my life. I'm choosing you. I've always chosen you. The relief that washed over me in that moment was overwhelming. But I knew that the battle was far from over. Ellie wasn't going to let go of her hold on Zoe that easily. If anything, her jealousy would only fuel her anger. The showdown came the very next day. I had just finished a workout when I got a message from Zoe. She said she needed to meet me at a cafe down the street. When I arrived, I found her sitting at a corner table, her eyes filled with worry. "It's happening," she said quietly as I sat down. "Ellie, she's not going to let us be happy. She's planning something. I don't know what, but I can feel it." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Ellie. "You don't get it, do you? You think you've won. But Zoe will never be truly happy with you. She'll always need me. You're nothing more than a temporary distraction. Watch your back." I felt a cold chill run through me as I read the words. I had known Ellie would lash out, but this was something else entirely. She was dangerous, and now I had no choice but to confront her head on. I put my phone down and looked at Zoe. "We need to end this. Once and for all." Zoe nodded, her eyes filled with the same resolve I had seen in her the night before. She wasn't afraid anymore. We weren't afraid anymore. I texted Ellie back, "You've made your move. But this game is over. Leave us alone, or you'll regret it." I knew this wasn't going to be enough. But it was the only thing I could do to show her that I wasn't afraid. That I wasn't backing down. Later that evening, Zoe and I found ourselves face to face with Ellie. She had shown up at Zoe's apartment uninvited, her eyes full of fire, her expression cold and calculating. "I knew you'd choose him," Ellie said, her voice laced with venom. "I knew you couldn't resist him. But you'll see, Zoe. You'll see what a mistake you've made. You're just going to end up hurt again, like always." I stood up straight, my chest swelling with confidence. "Enough, Ellie. You don't get to control this anymore. Zoe is with me. And I'm not going anywhere." Ellie's face twisted with rage. "You think you've won, but this is just the beginning. I'm not done yet." But I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. "Then you better be ready for what's coming," I said, my voice firm. "Because I'm done letting you manipulate us. You don't control Zoe. You don't control me. And you don't control our future." Zoe stepped forward, standing beside me. "You've been a part of my life for so long, Ellie. But I can't keep letting you ruin everything. I'm not afraid of you anymore." Ellie's expression faltered for a brief moment, but then she turned and stormed out of the apartment, her footsteps echoing in the hallway. It was over. For now. Zoe and I stood in silence for a long moment, the weight of everything that had just happened sinking in. But it didn't feel like the end. It felt like the beginning of something new. "Are you okay?" I asked quietly, reaching for her hand. She nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Yeah. I'm okay. We're okay." And for the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of peace. It wasn't perfect and it wasn't easy, but we had fought for each other. We had fought for our love. And that was all that mattered. The storm had passed. And we had weathered it together.